about look at Diddy, for instance. Let's take a look at him. Let's take a look at, he has videos. He has videos of the parties. Now, what I've heard, which I don't know how much of it is in mainstream media, I don't really follow the story that much, but what I've heard from friends that are attorneys, friends of mine that have represented me before, agents and so on, is there's a bidding war going on right now.
But the whispers go deeper. They suggest Diddy wasn't just a flashy mogul throwing parties and selling a dream. Behind the champagne bottles and glossy magazine covers, he may have been tied to one of the darkest mysteries in hip-hop history. His name shows up nearly 50 times in sealed transcripts linked to the Vegas ambush that ended Tupac Shakur's reign. And while Diddy cries innocence in a New York courtroom, the people who once protected him are finally breaking their silence. Front and center is Gene Deal, the former bodyguard who lived inside Diddy's armored convoys and penthouse suites. Deal just dropped a revelation so heavy it makes the charges in court look like just one piece of a much larger game. According to him, Tupac wasn't the reckless hothead the media kept painting him to be. He was sharper, playing a deeper strategy. Pac saw the setup coming, understood exactly how high the bounty on his head had climbed, and instead of waiting for his enemies to corner him, he flipped the whole script.
They don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their brand.
Deal hints that Pac used his outlaw persona as a survival playbook, fooling the very people who thought they were about to erase him. The claim? He staged his own exit, slipped off American soil, and built a hidden life abroad under a brand new identity. And here's the twist. Diddy himself, the man who believed he orchestrated Pac's downfall, got played in the process. Imagine the irony. Diddy parading in boardrooms, counting plaques, certain his only true rival was gone forever, all while the supposed casualty might have been watching from a distance, alive and untouched. Deal's testimony flips the whole narrative. Diddy may have believed he was pulling the strings, but Pac outmaneuvered him like a chess master setting up the board. The thought of Diddy smirking in private, convinced he wore the crown unchallenged, only to face whispers that his rival might still be alive somewhere. That's almost Shakespearean. Suddenly, the East Coast-West Coast saga stops looking like a tragedy and starts to resemble one of the greatest long cons in music history. The signs were sitting in plain sight all along. Fans obsessed over the Don Killuminati, the 7 Day Theory album with its chilling subtitle and that cryptic phrase, "Exit Shakur, enter Machiavelli." Some swore that when you rearrange Machiavelli, it spells out "Am Alive K." For decades, those eerie details were brushed off as nothing more than morbid Easter eggs from a young man obsessed with death. But what if it wasn't random? What if it was a coded message, an open blueprint from an artist who studied Niccolo Machiavelli's lessons on deception and survival?
Big went through their thing, and I was big man. That was the extent of our beef.
If Gene Deal's claims hold weight, that album wasn't a requiem. It was a declaration of intent. And the so-called inconsistencies start looking like red flags. The coroner's report listed Pac as 6 feet tall and 215 pounds, but everyone close to him knew he was 5'10", barely 168. Even the infamous autopsy photo, with its blurred tattoos and stiff, unnatural angles, looked more like a staged prop than truth. Then there's the cremator who supposedly handled Pac's remains. He retired immediately after, vanishing from the map. That disappearance alone set off endless speculation. Did he swap bodies? Was the corpse even Pac at all, or was the man silenced because he helped pull off the ultimate escape? The rabbit hole only gets deeper. Former security officer Michael Nice once told TMZ he personally smuggled Pac out after the hit was greenlit. He claimed Fidel Castro himself gave approval and even signed off on a body switch to complete the illusion.
I'm sorry, I'm just like really, I'm in this moment right now. This is crazy. Sorry. People don't really know how much what it does to you when something that you love is taken from you and thrown away like it don't even matter, and then they move on with their lives and you're stuck. You're stuck during those years. You're still stuck 21 years later.
According to Nice, Pac didn't die in Vegas. He was whisked onto a jet, Panthers by his side, flown to Barbados, and finally delivered to Cuba. He swore Pac acted as his own co-pilot, shaking hands with rescuers like a man stepping directly into his own myth. And then, just as Nice promised to reveal hard proof, he was gone under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence or cover-up, and the whispers refused to die. In Havana, locals say they've seen a man with Pac's unmistakable eyes, rocking a bandana and sunglasses, moving through the streets like a ghost that never left. Others swear he's popped up in Belize or even New Jersey. Online, grainy photos circulate, Pac next to Beyonce standing with 50 Cent. Dismissed as fakes, sure, but convincing enough to keep the legend alive and the internet buzzing louder every year. Even Suge Knight himself once hinted at the truth from behind bars. He mused, "Why you think nobody been arrested if they said they the one that took Shakur out? Because Shakur not gone. He's somewhere smoking a Cuban cigar." That line alone cracked the myth wide open. The more these threads get pulled, the less it feels like a crime scene, and more like an elaborate stage play acted out for the world. Even Afeni Shakur, Pac's own mother, once dropped a chilling remark that her son chose to leave quietly. What did she mean by that? Was it poetic, a mother's grief expressed in metaphor? Or was it a carefully veiled acknowledgement that her son staged his own exit and walked away on his own terms? And then there's the constant stream of posthumous albums, each sounding uncannily sharp, as if the voice behind the mic was never silenced at all.
And then what's the stuff that's happening to Wendy Williams? You think this is all connection to?
Of course.
Which brings us back to Gene Deal's explosive assertion. Pac wasn't blindsided, he wasn't reckless. He saw betrayal circling him, and he understood the brutal cost of refusing to bow in an industry where moguls played both kingmakers and enforcers. When the bounty on his head reached millions, Pac didn't wait for the trap to close, he flipped the entire game board. He transformed Machiavelli from just a stage persona into a survival code, carving out an exile life in the shadows far from cameras and contracts. The ultimate twist, he may have been planning to return on his own terms, ready to expose the men who thought they had buried him. The first cracks in the official story came with whispers of a body double. Some swore another deceased man had been swapped into Pac's hospital bed, completing the illusion. The coroner's report with its odd details became evidence. The rushed cremation became the smoking gun. In this theory, the chaos outside the hospital wasn't confusion, it was choreography. By the time Suge staggered out with bandages and shock on his face, Pac was already slipping toward a runway, new identity in hand, vanishing into the Caribbean night. And now, as Diddy faces shackles of his own, federal charges of coercion, trafficking, and building his empire like a criminal syndicate, the irony burns hotter than ever. He may have convinced himself he pulled off the perfect crime in 1996, erasing the only true rival who could stop him. But if Pac is alive, watching and waiting, then Diddy's so-called victory has been nothing but hollow. And if that day ever comes, when Shakur steps out of the shadows and reveals the greatest disappearing act in music history, it won't just haunt Diddy. It will shatter everything he built, proving that the man he thought was gone had been alive all along.
Unfortunately, we're all going to take a disgusting trip to his seedy, awful world. You know, the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done.
The discrepancies, the whispered confessions, the odd autopsy details, and the constant sightings all collide into one chilling possibility. What if the Vegas shooting wasn't an ending at all, but the beginning of something larger? What if those bullets were nothing more than stage props in a carefully designed disappearing act, executed with the precision of a mastermind? What if the real Tupac Shakur has been living under new identities for nearly 30 years, simply waiting for the right moment to return? If that's true, then the story is far from over. It might just be approaching its most explosive chapter. And this is exactly where Diddy's nightmares creep into reality, because one thread refuses to go away: the Black Panther connection. Pac wasn't just a rapper caught in petty industry beefs. He was born into a family forged in revolution. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was a Panther, and his godfather was a militant who spent decades clashing with federal agencies. With roots like that, it's not far-fetched to picture a safety net ready to catch him when Los Angeles became too deadly. Some insiders even claim the Vegas shooting itself wasn't chaos at all. It was cover. A trigger for a military-grade extraction carried out by people trained to operate in shadows. And if any network had the motivation, resources, and discipline to pull off the impossible, it was the Panthers. After all, what could be a stronger act of resistance than saving the most outspoken rapper of his era?
Terrence Howard appeared on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David, and the episode, this premiered on April 4th. Definitely making the rounds because in this episode, Terrence Howard describes an interaction with Diddy where he says that he believes that Diddy was trying to have sex with him. Let's take a listen.
That theory grows heavier when you consider Pac's aunt, Assata Shakur. She remains one of America's most wanted after breaking free from prison and resurfacing safely in Cuba. If Assata could slip out of the government's grip and find sanctuary under Castro's protection, why couldn't her nephew? Whispers say the very same channels used to smuggle Assata to Havana were reopened decades later for Tupac himself. For the Panthers, it wasn't about saving a celebrity, it was about preserving a legacy, ensuring the son of the movement survived. And when you think about it, every fiery lyric Pac ever dropped against the system sounds more like prophecy than performance. Every verse about refusing to bow, every word about defying power. It all doubled as evidence he was a symbol too valuable to sacrifice. Which brings the trail full circle, back to Michael Nice, the man who swore he watched Tupac board a jet, Panthers flanking him, vanishing into history with a story almost too cinematic to believe. Michael Nice painted the escape like a prison break straight out of a movie. He recalled, "It was me, my brother, the pilot, Shakur as co-pilot, and 2 Panther guys on the jet. We took off and instantly knew we were safe. It felt like escaping from prison." According to him, this wasn't some desperate improvisation. It was sanctioned at the highest level. He claimed Fidel Castro himself approved the plan, setting strict conditions for Pac's survival in exile. Stay silent, never admit he was alive, and never risk exposing Cuba to an international scandal.
Same thing for Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the interesting thing about the Epstein and the theory about Epstein is we know he filmed people for sure on that island. He has a lot of movies, a lot of films of people that are very, very powerful political figures. And entertainers, business people. So, do you really believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself? Of course not. Of course not. No.
But here's where the story takes a sinister twist. Just when Michael Nice promised the world hard proof, he was suddenly reported gone. Fans who had followed his interviews never bought the idea that it was coincidence. Was it failing health, an accident, or was he silenced before he could deliver the receipts? Even his own colleagues admitted his passing came at the most convenient moment imaginable, ensuring that no tapes, no testimony, and no documents ever reached the public, and the fragments Nice did reveal before his disappearance only fueled darker suspicions. He spoke about a body switch inside the hospital, money quietly changing hands, and a double stepping in to play the role of a lifeless Shakur. According to Nice, the relief didn't hit until the jet touched down in Barbados, before the Panthers made the final handoff to Cuba. If true, it would mean the entire Vegas spectacle was stage theater for the world. While cameras zoomed in on chaos and flashing sirens, the real Tupac was already gliding across international waters. The Panthers provided the muscle, Castro the sanctuary, and Shakur himself provided the deception, a perfect trinity for survival.
I can't wait. I can't wait for everybody to find out what's really been going on in the background.
Still, life in exile isn't the glamorous fantasy fans imagine. It's its own prison. For Pac, a man who thrived on the roar of crowds, public energy, and constant reinvention, decades of enforced silence would be brutal. Being forced into invisibility might have saved his life, but it would also strip away his identity. Every day cut off from the stage, every night spent unheard would feel like slow erosion. For someone who lived on adrenaline, exile wouldn't just be strategy, it would be punishment. Over time, the charismatic poet of the 90s may have hardened into something else entirely, reshaped by secrecy, solitude, and the weight of staying hidden. Psychologists describe long-term isolation as a kind of rebirth. When someone disappears into hiding, they rarely return the same person, if they return at all. For Tupac Shakur, that transformation could have been earth-shattering. His art always carried themes of rebellion, survival, and resistance, but exile may have reshaped those instincts into something far darker. Decades of silence could breed paranoia, distrust, and the constant feeling that betrayal might strike again at any moment. Imagine living year after year blending into the background, reduced to watching the world evolve from afar while never being part of it. The Tupac that fans adored was young, fiery, and unafraid to spit truth into any microphone. But the Tupac of today, if he's truly alive, might burn differently. Less like a blazing firestorm, more like a slow, relentless ember that refuses to die.
There's different things that's not really beef though. That's just competitive.
Competitiveness.
All right, so you and Diddy, you and Puff cool?
No, I don't really rock with him.
Okay.
And that raises the haunting question. If Tupac were to step out of hiding now, would we even recognize him? Not just in the lines etched on his face, not just in the weight of decades carried on his shoulders, but in his very essence. Could a man forged by decades of secrecy and silence still embody the same fearless ideals? Or would he return carrying a worldview warped by years in exile, shaped more by survival than by art? Perhaps his reemergence wouldn't shock us because he's alive, but because he's unrecognizable. A man remolded in shadows, carrying truths too heavy for the stage to hold. That possibility makes the stakes of his return higher than ever. Because what Diddy would face may not be the Shakur of the 90s, but a version molded by survival itself. And here's the darker question. Why stay hidden for so long? If exile was meant to protect him, why not step back once the danger cooled? That's where every road leads back to Diddy. In some versions of the story, Diddy gave Tupac a ruthless ultimatum: disappear completely or face a permanent end. The so-called bounty, the whispered millions placed on Pac's head, wasn't just a gangland rumor. It was a final warning that there was no safe corner of America left for him. Forced to choose between vanishing and risking a bloody showdown, Pac chose disappearance. In a twisted irony, Diddy's own hunger for power may have been the spark that pushed the legend underground. What should have been a tragic ending instead became one of the greatest disappearances in music history.
Is he this gangster that behind the scenes is that him? Or is that people
Shout
around?
out to Wendy Williams.
Imagine the irony. Diddy spent decades parading untouchable wealth, calling himself king, while federal agents circled and accusers piled on with stories of coercion, trafficking, and intimidation. And all the while, the one rival he thought was erased may have been alive, watching quietly from the shadows. Somewhere out there, the man Diddy feared most may have been silently watching, waiting, gathering evidence, and building a case for the day the world is finally ready to see him again. And the whispers aren't whispers anymore, they're bolder than ever. Some theorists believe Tupac has a secret vault of unreleased footage, testimonies, and written accounts hidden away like a time bomb, an archive powerful enough to obliterate every defense Diddy has left if it ever surfaced. Others argue Pac has been carefully timing his return, waiting for the exact moment when stepping back into the spotlight would strike with maximum impact. And right now, with Diddy's empire collapsing, federal prosecutors circling, and former allies abandoning ship, that moment feels closer than ever. Which leaves us with the question millions debate in barbershops, forums, and late-night conversations. What happens if Shakur steps out of the shadows tomorrow? Picture it, Pac standing at a microphone, alive, unbroken, his voice cutting through decades of silence. Would that sight alone collapse the last shaky pieces of Diddy's empire? Could he unveil a hidden history that flips everything we thought we knew about the East Coast-West Coast war? Or would his return ignite chaos, exposing just how far powerful figures went to bury the truth in the first place? If that day comes, it won't just rewrite music history, it'll detonate cultural history in real time. And maybe that's the nightmare haunting Diddy right now. Not just a courtroom verdict, but the looming possibility that the rival he believed defeated forever might rise again, ready to reclaim his place and reveal the darkest truths of the industry. So now it's on you. If Shakur reappears, does Diddy's empire crumble overnight, or does the world rally behind a legend who fooled them all? Say what you think in the comments, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next headline, because the one that proves it all could drop any day now.